weather, traffic. This is PM Orlando with Michael Yaffe on News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
I wanted to go over, to end the show today, I wanted to go over this story I heard and talk about it because this is a great example of why Trump really drives me crazy when it comes to his trade policy. Mm-hmm. It's a big thing of mine. I support Trump on so many things, but when it comes to a lot of things he says about trade, he's not wrong on everything. China needs to be reined in on a lot of things. There's no doubt about it. But he says some other things that really bother me. And here's what I mean. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. China's annual trade surplus with the U.S. hits record last year despite Trump's tariff offensive. So he's been putting tariffs on him and everything, and the trade surplus has actually gone up. Trump says his goal is to cut the trade surplus in half. Says China posted a trade surplus of $323.32 billion with the U.S. in 2018. Now, there's a couple of different reasons why this has happened. First, what happened is because Trump is pushing all these tariffs, a lot of American companies are buying surplus Chinese goods. Remember, there's a lot of manufacturing companies in this country, a lot of American manufacturing companies in this country that import from China for their manufacturing base. Mm-hmm. So believe it or not, tariffs can actually hurt manufacturing in the United States. Sure. That's something Trump doesn't want you to know. But what happened is they bought a lot of surplus before the tariffs went into effect. So that's gonna cause to this trade imbalance. But there's another reason why. The biggest reason why the trade surplus is going to go up and possibly continue to go up is because the American economy is doing so well. Trump could actually spin this in his advantage if he wanted to, because the American economy is doing so well, and that means more Americans have more consumer spending money and companies have more money to invest in their companies. So since Americans have more money to invest, more money to spend, that means they can buy more products. Well, where do they buy a lot of those products? From China. See, the reason why this bothers me so much is because President Trump keeps acting like a trade deficit with any country is a bad thing, is the worst thing ever. Not necessarily. It's called trade. We're getting something in return. We're getting products in return. Yes, we're giving them money, but we get products that help American manufacturing, but also help American consumers. So when the economy goes up, that means the trade surplus, a lot of times, that China has over us will also go up because we have more money to spend than China does. All these tariffs are not necessarily going to help because China's economy is hurting. They're hurting. So they're not going to have as much money to spend on American goods. So while we might be importing less from China, we're also going to be exporting less to China because China's not going to have the money to actually buy the products. So this really is why I feel, by the way, China's exports to the U.S. rose 11.3% in 2018, while imports from the U.S. inched up 0.7%. That's from China's General Administration of Customs. We'll see what happens next year. But that's really why, well, I find Trump's trade policies in a lot of cases, especially when he talks about how all trade surpluses are bad, because you know what country has no trade deficit? Venezuela.
Well,
do we want to be like Venezuela?
I don't think so.
So this is why a lot of times I find Trump's trade policy beyond reason.
News for the ride home, right after Dave. PM Orlando starts at 5 p.m. News Radio 93.1.
So a razor company, I never thought I would say this headline, Tom Benson, but I'm saying this headline. A razor company is making headlines because of a controversial commercial. They stirring the pot a little bit because they put out a commercial dealing with the Me Too movement, and it's going to play during the Super Bowl, and here is some of that commercial.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get?
Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy? What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says we've crossed the line.
And there will be no going back. Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
So that was part of the commercial that's supposed to play during the Super Bowl. It's a Gillette commercial. Gillette's facing a lot of competition these days, not only because a lot of people are wearing beards, but there are other razor companies doing well. But I have a couple of takes on this commercial from my Beyond Reason commentary of the day. Here's the thing. I do not believe that toxic masculinity is an epidemic in this country. The commercial itself is not the worst thing in the world. Telling men or telling people to act better in a society and highlighting those bad men that do bad things against women, not exactly the worst thing in the world. It doesn't necessarily make me want to buy a razor. I mean, I get tired of commercials that actually don't promote their product. That being said, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it kind of puts out this image that men are the problem in society. That toxic masculinity is so rampant and has been in American history, and women have just been oppressed. And that men need to take a back seat now and let women take charge and take the bigger role in society. Here's the thing. I don't believe toxic masculinity is an epidemic in society. Because I'm a Christian. I believe that both men and women are sinners. That if anything is an epidemic in worldly society, it's not toxic masculinity, it's sin. And that happens to both men and women. Of all races, all genders, all orientations, sin is a problem. So Gillette is putting out a commercial trying to convince people to change. There's actually this book that's been around for thousands of years that would probably be better for you to read if you really want to change your life. And more people to read it, and it would be better. It's called The Bible. Now, reading from the New Testament, I just want to read you one part talking about husbands. Ephesians, it's from Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. It says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with the water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies." And what basically saying that men should love their women, love their wives as Christ loved the church. That means men should act like Christ. And if all men did that, there would be more compassion, more humility, more giving, and more love in this society. Remember what Christ did for his church. He died for his church, gave the ultimate sacrifice. That is the real message that men should be getting today. If more men actually got that message, this would be a better society. Instead, we're getting a message from a Gillette commercial that toxic masculinity is an epidemic and a problem. It's not. Sin is a problem among all people, and they should read the Bible to combat it.
Stay tuned for PM Orlando, right after Dave Ramsey at 5 p.m. News Radio 93.1.
So I started the show today talking about the teacher shortage that's in Florida, specifically dealing with a lot of the STEM subjects, science, technology, but it was mostly science, reading, and math, which you think are the most important subjects coming out of public school, that are finding teacher shortages. What they're having to do is get teachers that are not really certified in those areas to teach those classes. But I really wanted to talk about why I really think the public education system is beyond reason and something that really needs to change. It's something I've actually talked about before. Professor Mark Logus hosted Good Morning Orlando earlier this week, which is Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. I'll be hosting tomorrow. Mark Logus is a professor at Valencia. He teaches government and other similar classes. He always does a civics test at the beginning of the semester. He doesn't grade them on this or anything, just to see what they know about American government and what's going on in politics. And every year he says, since he's done this, what they know about it actually gets worse. I want to play some audio here of Mark Logus on Monday talking about the results from his students on that civics test. Here it is.
Federalism, less than half knew that it shared governance between the federal and state governments. Most students believe we work for government, not the other way around, that government works for us. 100%. I put questions in here where every student should get it. 100% answered, who is the president of the United States? 25% could name the Speaker of the House, and I let them choose either Pelosi or Paul Ryan because we were in that transition. Not one student could name the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Not one. 90% knew the governor, and again, I gave them DeSantis or Scott. 30% knew how many senators there are in the U.S. Senate. 10% knew there were 435 representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives. Only 10% knew there are 9 U.S. Supreme Court justices. And not one student knew the total number of electoral college votes.
Those results are stunning. But, you know, I started thinking about this more. When I got out of high school, I'm not sure I would have known all of those answers. I probably would have known more than most of his students. But I learned most about government and politics after high school and college because I really got into it. Talk radio helped me out a lot, too, in that regard, which is why one reason I love talk radio. But the reason why this is because it's not really a focus of public education. See, the minds who direct what public education and the curriculum teach, they are so focused on STEM subjects. I'm not against STEM subjects, science, technology, English, math, all of that stuff. But I have always believed that the main role of public education should be to teach people to participate in self-government. What I mean by that is a republic can only work with an educated populace. And it can only work if people understand how to participate in the process. Instead, we are so focused on teaching coding, which I understand coding is a big part of technology right now, but in the future, the computers are going to do it by themselves, to be honest. A lot of people are not going to be able to do that. But to me, the country's going to fail if everyone knows how to code, if everyone knows how to make a website, but they don't know how many senators are in each state, if they don't know how the House of Representatives works or the 3 branches of government work or what's in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Those should be the most important aspects in public education today. But it's not. It's falling way behind, and it's because it isn't really a main priority. In high school, I only got 1 semester of American government. Not even a full year, 1 semester. That's what they get here in Central Florida. They get 1 semester of economics and 1 semester of government. So people come out of high school really unprepared, and then those people vote not really understanding how the Constitution works, what this was all about. Don't get me started on American history. These are the most important subjects, but they're not taught. The mindset behind making the curriculum in public schools today is totally backwards. I also think we need to have more shop classes. I didn't really have shop class in high school. I really wish I would because that's practical stuff that I could use in my everyday life. The problem is they're so focused on creating worker bees because all of this kind of stuff, STEM technology classes will help them in the economy. That's important, but the most important thing should be to teach them how to participate in self-government. They have to understand the Constitution. They have to understand civics. It needs to be taught throughout high school, not just for 1 semester. That's why the public education system today is really beyond reason.
News, weather, traffic. This is PM Orlando with Michael Yaffe on News Radio 93.1 WFLA.
Check out this headline by Clay Kane on CNN, writing an opinion piece on CNN.com.
Mm-hmm.
Karen and Mike Pence's astonishing moral hypocrisy. So what was the dastardly thing that Mike Pence's wife, Karen, did.
She got a job.
She got a job as an art teacher at a Christian school in Virginia. How dare she? I know. The problem with this school, at least what this writer has, is that school bans LGBTQ children and requires employees to declare their religious beliefs. Oh, no, you mean a religious institution has religious standards? How could they? Believe it or not, the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the Bible and you don't have to be a Christian. But what this writer says in CNN says, this is like The Handmaid's Tale. Yes, it's exactly like The Handmaid's Tale, a show about a dystopia where they have a group of women who are raped to breed. Yeah, this is the same thing, right? It's the same exact thing. No, of course it's not. Basically, they're criticizing her because her husband's the vice president, and that means he wants to create a theocracy. You know, a theocracy in this country. It's absolutely ridiculous. All these pieces are about is attacking Christianity. What a lot of people on the left want to do is they want to take out Christians in public office and move Christianity into the private sphere, not in the public sphere, and eventually relegate them to minority status in this society. But luckily, there is one senator who is actually standing up for Christian values. A lot of this audience doesn't like him because he was a never-Trumper, but Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska led an effort to reaffirm the constitutional clause for forbidding the use of religious tests for public office holders. This effort was prompted by recent questioning of the Catholic judicial nominee, Brian Boucher, over his membership in the Knights of Columbus. Absolutely ridiculous that this was even an issue that came up. But Ben Sasse went to the Senate floor and talked about it. This is what he said.
But it is the stuff of basic neighborliness. Well, this is where our story gets weird. Because at Brian's confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee a few weeks ago, one of my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee called the Knights of Columbus an extremist organization. It got worse. Brian then got a letter from a member of this body asking him if he would resign his membership in the Knights of Columbus if he were confirmed to the federal bench to, quote, avoid the appearance of bias. This is nuts. We're talking about the largest Catholic fraternal organization in the world being called an extremist organization, and a nominee for the federal bench being asked if he would resign from this organization so that he could serve without the appearance of bias. The clear implication here was that Brian's religious beliefs and his religious affiliations, in this case, an affiliation with a Catholic organization that invests countless hours and millions of dollars annually serving special needs kids, Brian was supposedly, therefore, potentially unfit for federal service. This is the same kind of garbage that was thrown at a member of this body, John F. Kennedy, 60 years ago when he was campaigning for the presidency. And so today, I've introduced a resolution, a 101-level basic resolution, that simply reaffirms the belief of this body in American religious liberty.
So the good news behind all that is the Senate, including the Democrats in the Senate, backed his resolution unanimously. So far, religious freedom still exists in America, but there's a lot of people in this country, as I've mentioned before, that do not like the idea of religious freedom. They're okay if you practice religion in your home or in your church. Well, actually, they're probably not really okay with that either. But they don't want it anywhere in the public sphere. They feel like religion should, you have the organization called Freedom from Religion. Their whole goal is so you can't practice religion in public. The whole idea of this is an attack on Christianity and Christian beliefs. There are a lot of other Christian beliefs that exist, including, abstinence before marriage, not having sex before marriage. But nobody attacks Christianity for that belief. There's a lot of things that you're called to do as a Christian that is not in line with the rest of the world. But the left is using the LGBTQ agenda because they know and they think it will be effective against Christians. These people don't even understand how Christianity works. Christianity is about love and compassion, even for those you disagree with, even for those who you consider your enemy. Just because you disagree with a lifestyle doesn't mean you hate the people that practice that lifestyle. You just believe that you are called for a higher purpose. For many different things, not just homosexuality. But they don't like that. They don't like Christianity. They believe that it's against our society, and they want to promote their agenda. And, of course, they want an excuse to sin. And this whole thing, this whole attack on Christianity is just beyond reason.
News for the ride home, right after Dave. PM Orlando starts at 5 p.m. News Radio 93.1.
Today I have signed a letter to Congress to make clear that if they send any legislation to my desk that weakens the protection of human life, I will issue a veto, and we have the support to uphold those vetoes.
And we gather here because we believe, as our founders did, that we are, all of us, born and unborn, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and first among these rights is the right to life.
So that was President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence, who both gave surprise addresses to the pro-life march in D.C. today. Huge march that was expected to have over 100,000 people, a big march every year. It never gets quite the media attention as, say, the Women's March. Of course, the Women's March is getting a lot of negative media attention because they found out a bunch of the organizers, were anti-Semites. Probably not a good thing. But the pro-life march is today, and it seems like the pro-life movement is winning. According to some new poll numbers, Marist poll out this year, in the past couple of years, has shown that more and more people want limits on abortion. This year, it says more Americans may identify as pro-choice than pro-life, but more than 6 in 10 of those who say they are pro-choice join the 3/4 of all Americans in wanting abortion restricted to, at most, the first trimester. So do about 6 in 10 Democrats. So even though most Americans say they are pro-choice, they still want some restrictions. They don't want just unlimited abortions. One person who has been a voice of reason on this is Ben Shapiro. He was on Fox News last night talking about it, and he was at the pro-life march today. And this is what he said about the pro-life movement.
Every scientist says that human life begins at conception. That is definitionally when human life begins. And if you want to argue about the gradations of when you think human life begins to matter, then you're not talking about science anymore. You're talking about a subjective judgment about when you think that a life should begin to matter. But if we're talking about the formation of new DNA strands, the formation of a new human being, that obviously begins at conception. And from the pro-life perspective, once you have a human life that has begun, you cannot intervene. That means that all the arguments that are being made by the pro-choice side are really not arguments even about the baseline science. It's just arguments that are couched in terms of which human beings and which human lives are unworthy of being protected. When I speak to young audiences, I speak to college audiences all the time, this is what I see. The focus on the pro-life movement among young people has never been religiously based. And this is where the media really do lie about the pro-life movement. The impression that you get of the pro-life movement when you listen to media coverage from mainstream media networks is typically that pro-lifers are driven by religious zeal, that it's a bunch of people who go to church, and that's where they learn the Psalms, and then because they've read the Psalms, they decide that babies are worthy of protection. But the truth is, the real momentum in the pro-life movement is about young people who have seen 3D ultrasounds, 4D ultrasounds. They've actually seen the pictures. We now know what babies look like in the womb. We know what developmental stages babies go through. And that's a very convincing argument to young people.
So he is exactly right, especially about the last part. When you look at the actual science, when you look at the sonograms in the first trimester, in the second trimester, when you see what is being killed when you have an abortion, it's hard to continue to be pro-choice. It just is. That's the reality. Now, I know people personally who have had abortions. I don't hate them. I don't think they should be rounded up and arrested or anything. But I do believe what they did was wrong for the reasons that Ben cited there. If you really want to be convinced to be pro-life, if you really want to hear some evidence of why it is important to be pro-life and why abortion is wrong, what I want you to do is go watch the Gosnell movie about that abortion doctor who was killing fetuses out of the womb. There's one part in that movie where basically he points out that if the same thing that happens in an abortion happened outside the womb at the same time, the same age of the fetus, it would be considered murder. But because it happens inside the woman, it's seen as okay. It is beyond reason that this kind of stuff still happens in this country. Abortion is wrong, and the pro-life movement is winning for good reason.